There's a man in the back corner there. Seth is back there. Wave your hands. Wave. Okay. He's extremely important tonight. He's extremely important. I'm not going to embarrass you, don't worry, but you're important. No, I'm not. I'm going to ignore you now. Don't think about him. Okay. You know, on account of the fact that we were expecting students and their families from the religious school here, and Seth and his father came, and we really value that. I was delaying giving a sermon that I delayed from last week that really was a delay from a sermon that I didn't give on Rosh Hashanah. And the fate of this sermon is in jeopardy now. I know. You know, I work long on sermons, and then I went back and looked at the sermon and said, can I do something with it that's relevant for Shabbat? And in the process, I deleted it. Now, trust me, I'm not going to miss it. And second of all is, basically every sermon I ever give, I can reconstruct in my head. But that's one of my few things I can do well. But I'm not giving any version of this tonight. I'm not giving it next week because I'm going to be out of town. I'm visiting my children. So I am announcing that maybe a month. So next week, 2 weeks, it'll be like a month, 5 weeks after Rosh Hashanah or Yom Kippur. So this sermon is percolating. It's going to keep developing, and hopefully by the time I get to it, it'll either be really good or so stale that it's going to die like a lead. It's going to fall down. But okay, doesn't matter. But I want to talk about something totally different. It has nothing to do with politics. I don't want to talk about politics. I'm not telling you who to vote for. Just want you to vote, that's all. And we pray that good things happen for our country. You don't need to hear me say anything one way or the other. Every intelligent person in this room, and all of you are intelligent, you know who you're going to vote for or not vote for, so it's irrelevant. I want to focus in on something really practical. And what I would call it is halakha l'maaseh. In other words, how Jews actually act as Jews. Okay? What we actually do. And I want to focus on the idea that's so fundamental, and even though it's in my gut, I think that people don't fully understand it and the implication of it. And it's the word, the idea, the institution of a minyan. M-I-N-Y-A-N. According to Jewish tradition, and I'm talking, let's not get into, well, what the Reform movement does this, and I'm not interested in. I'm talking in general, in the last 2,000 years of Jewish history, and we can find our place in it or not in it. I'm not really concerned about that. I'm talking about in general in Jewish tradition. In Jewish tradition, ideally, there are 3 prayer services in a day. And if you look in our Siddur, just take the Siddur, and I'm not making things up here. If you turn to, we're in the middle of an evening service that we just did for Shabbat. But if you turn in your Siddur to page, what page are we turning to? If you turn to page 118, you have the morning service. And then if you keep turning and turning and turning, you come to the afternoon service of our prayer book that begins on page 162. So even in our union prayer book, there are these 3 prayer services. Now, there are prayer services that are part of a religious community, but even if you're not part of a religious community, Jews traditionally pray 3 times a day. Whether we do or not is a whole other discussion, but let's not talk about that now. And the question is, do you need to pray with other people? Or is praying by yourself okay? And Judaism says, without doubt, you do everything in your power to pray with others. Now, minyan, the word, it describes the quorum of 10 Jewish adults required for certain religious obligations. And the word comes from the Hebrew root, which is maneh, which means to count, to number. One can always say one's prayers by oneself at any time or place, but praying with others brings a sense of connection and closeness in a religious community. That's not a hard idea to understand. We don't eat Thanksgiving dinner alone, hopefully. We don't celebrate a Seder by ourselves. We don't play most sports by ourselves. You can't play football, baseball, or soccer by yourself unless there are people of... You can't. And I'm no athlete. I know that. The presence of others is essential. The idea of a minyan is important because many prayers cannot be said without a minyan. Yes, you can pray, but there are certain things that you can't say without a minyan. For example, on the beginning of the service, you brought Brendan brought our congregation together with a baruch hu, where we stand up and I call it the call to worship. It's the call to worship. You can't call anyone to worship unless you have a minyan. You can't read the Torah without a minyan. You can't recite the Kaddish, the mourner's prayer, without a minyan. You can't you can't say the Amidah out loud without a minyan. And there are other rituals that require a minyan, including, most people don't realize this, the Sheva Brachot, the 7 blessings of a wedding. You need a minyan. Okay? Only adult Jews can be counted in a minyan, meaning Jews who have reached the age, that means Jews who have reached the age of majority. And we're in an egalitarian framework, so it's boys who are 13 in a day, and in girls in Jewish tradition, they're 12 in a day. Girls become bat mitzvah technically at 1 year earlier than boys. And having had a bar bat mitzvah ceremony is not required to be part of a minyan. If you're old enough, you count. So where does the idea come from? It's really kind of intriguing where this idea of 10 comes from. There are a few explanations. First is from the story of Noah, which is the Torah portion for this week, where there were 8 people, Noah, his 3 sons and wives, plus the presence of God, and that was not enough to save the world from destruction, whereas 10 might have. Similarly, in the story of Abraham and the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, because Abraham couldn't even find 10 righteous people, God destroyed the cities. Later, when the Jews were dwelling in the wilderness after the exodus from Egypt, 10 men were sent to scope out the land of Israel and came back with a negative report. And the Talmud interprets this as saying, is this group, the word is Edah, denotes 10 men. Now here's an important question. How much does one have to try to be part of a minyan? How far must one travel from his home in order to pray Tefilat B'tzibur in a community? In other words, how hard do you have to work to be part of a minyan? Or put it another way, how far do you have to live from a minyan not to be obligated to join the minyan? I'm trying to be nice. You have to, I'm going to test you on this. You know, I'm retiring June 30th, but who's counting? And someday you'll invite me back. You might say, let's dust off Londi and bring him back. And on that day, I'm going to ask you, Ken, God willing, you'll be here, and I'm going to ask you this question. So remember this. If the closest minyan is 18 minutes a walk, or more each way from one's home, he's exempt from praying with a minyan. Now, so I live 15 minutes walking distance from the synagogue, and if we had a morning service here, I would have no excuse under the sun not being here. I'm not promising I would be because I'm not a perfect Jew, but I must pray with a minyan. Now, it gets more interesting. If a person owns a car and uses it routinely, the person must travel by car for up to 18 minutes. So if you can get here by car in less than 18 minutes, you're obligated to be here. This is not guilt invoking, but I hope it guilts people a little bit. Is there anything wrong with guilt if it motivates people to do good things? No. God, I knew I liked it.
People to guilt aren't, these people can't.
No, I'm trying to talk. I mean, come on, give me a break. Okay, so why is this important? Because the number of people who are present in the sanctuary matters. Each of you matters. The synagogue is stronger than last week because you're here. It matters to Judaism, it matters to the synagogue, it matters to me, and I'm going to be presumptuous, it matters to God. The strength of our community depends that we can get 10 Jewish people together to pray, to worship. And if we cannot, we are diminished. Now, Rabbi Jonathan Sacks, who I could quote every sermon, which I intend to do until the end of my life, because his brilliance never ceases to amaze me, he wrote something about this, and I'm going to quote him. He says, Rabbi Yehuda Halevi, a great Jewish scholar, taught this in the Kuzari. Individual prayer is like protecting yourself by building a wall around your house. Collective prayer is like joining with others to maintain the wall around the city. The wall around the city protects everyone, not just me. That's good. I'm going to repeat that because Yehuda Halevi is worth repeating. What does Rabbi Yehuda Halevi say in the Kuzari? Individual prayer is like protecting yourself by building a wall around your house. Collective prayer is like joining with others to maintain the wall around the city. The wall around the city protects everyone, not just me. Then Rabbi Sacks goes on to say, besides which, when I pray for myself, I may pray selfishly, asking for something that may directly benefit me, but might also be harmful to others. If I sell ice cream, I want the sun to shine. If I sell umbrellas, I want the rain to fall. Praying together, we seek not private good, but for the common good. Communal prayer is not just an expression of community, it's also a builder of community. We are social, not solitary beings. We long, most of us, for company. Being with others is important. And even the marvels of Zoom, Skype, YouTube, Facebook Live, WhatsApp, FaceTime cannot compensate for the loss of the real thing, face-to-face encounter. Now let me tell you about my encounter with the Minyan. When I was in elementary school, I went to Hebrew school 3 times a week plus junior congregation on the Sabbath. You had to go in the conservative movement at that time. It was 6 hours of religious school education plus Saturday junior congregation. And I have to admit that I was not an honor student in Hebrew school, and I misbehaved in junior congregation every Shabbat. I changed, obviously, but maybe that was the beginning of who I was as a Jew. That was what was required of you. And I remember one Sunday when I was 12 years old, an old man came into our classroom. And what do you think he wanted? There was a morning worship service taking place. And they had only 9 people. And they needed a 10th person. And I was scared. First of all, you think, okay, I'm going to get to I was only 12. I was scared. I didn't want to volunteer. I don't know what's going to happen to me. And these old guys scared the hell out of me. Another person volunteered, a friend of mine, Bruce Apple, or maybe because he was older than I was. And here is the rule followed by some, that in certain extenuating circumstances, 9 adults may include a minor who is holding a chumash, a Bible in his hand, as part of the minyan. Just think about that. If you have 9 adults and you need a 10th person to make the minyan, you can find the oldest minor that you can find. give him a chumash, give him a Hebrew Bible, have the child hold it, and then you're going to count that child as the 10th person in the minyan. You find the child who's closest to the age of 13, and that is the person. So here's what we need to remember. Being Jewish is about being part of a community. We need each other. I can't be Jewish without other Jews sharing and believing the same things that I do. And I say to all of you, those streaming, those of you who are here, and especially our students, I wish, we need you to come here. Not just on special Shabbatot. We need people to be here as many times as they can make it. And this is not a guilt trip in any way. A person isn't a bad person if they don't come. That's ridiculous. It's because those of us who are here are sad when you're not here. I'm going to repeat that, and it's what I feel so deeply in my heart. It's because those of us who are here are sad when you're not here. And when you are here, we become a synagogue. And the synagogue isn't a building. The synagogue is a place where at least 10 people come together, where we depend on each other. And many people are here to remember the death of a loved one. It's called observing Yahrzeit, and they say Kaddish. And they can't do it without 9 other people to be with them. They come expecting others will be here to make it possible, and therefore we need each other. As is often said, Woody Allen said 80% of life is just showing up. People have made it into 90. Some people said 99. I researched it's 80, but I like 90 better. So, as Woody Allen should have said, 90% of life is just showing up. And I thank God this Shabbat, as always, that we're committed to being together on Shabbat. We make a minyan. We create holiness. We make the new Reformed temple. We don't exist without us together. And we can have the most beautiful building, the most renovated building, the most talented musicians. You can have a rabbi that every once in a while says a coherent thing from the pulpit. But it doesn't mean anything unless we're together. Shabbat Shalom.